Well, okay, Save America. Stop the spending. Stop the taxing, the regulating, and the inflating while you're at it. Joining us now, we welcome back Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, who's a member of the Banking, Budget, and Judicial Committees. Excuse me. Senator Kennedy, wonderful to see you, sir.
You too.
I don't. If anything comes out of this White House meeting, we're going to, immediately start putting it on the full screen and talking about it. But right now, nobody knows. I guess I'll ask you, what do you expect? Well, that's kind of an unfair question, but what do you think might happen? But more importantly, Senator Kennedy, what should happen, okay? What should happen after a meeting like this?
Let me answer it this way, Larry. There are, I was thinking about this walking over. There are two things I am supremely confident of today. Number one, I'm pretty sure that President Biden didn't get his son Hunter a laptop for Christmas. Number two, I am supremely confident that Jay Powell, because I know him from the Banking Committee, is going to do whatever it takes to get control of inflation, even if he has to raise rates to 8 or 9 or 10%. Now, he won't have to do that if Congress does its part. And what does that mean? That means we have to slow the growth of spending and slow the growth of debt accumulation. We've had 10 periods of disinflation since the 1950s. We never were able to reduce inflation unless the Federal Reserve did its job on the monetary side, but Congress did its job on the fiscal side. So from where I see it, President Biden, if he cares about people, he doesn't have any choice. And I'll make this other point. When we say, well, Jay Powell's trying to slow the economy, what does that mean? Well, we know it means raising interest rates. What does that mean? He's trying to put people out of work. That's his job. That's the role of the Federal Reserve. And the more recalcitrant President Biden is in telling Congress to stop spending so much money and accumulating so much debt, the higher Jay Powell has got to raise interest rates and the more people he's got to put out to work. Now, that's the bottom line. And that's why the stakes of these talks are very, very high.
So basically what you're saying is fiscal policy, I'll call it budget policy, is working against monetary policy. The budget,
yes, absolutely.
The budget is loose and should be tight. The Fed, on the other hand, is being forced to get tighter and tighter. Now, I don't think the Fed is without blame in the last 2 years. But putting that aside, they're doing their job now in the past year. They've taken rates up. They've taken cash out of the economy. They've lowered the money supply, and the inflation is starting to come down. And your point, if I understand you, sir, is it's high time the government showed some responsibility, and they started taking cash out of the economy, at least by slowing down the rate of spending. Is that fair?
Yes, you put it much better than I did.
No.
Look, Jay, Chairman Powell, they started, as we both know, Larry, fighting inflation too late. They should have done it earlier. But at some point, you have to stop regretting yesterday and start creating tomorrow. In my opinion, Chairman Powell is serious as an aneurysm. He is going to raise rates as high as he has to raise them. People like Larry Summers, Jason Furman, other Democrat economists have said it could be as high as 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10% of federal funds rate. He's going to do whatever it takes to get control of inflation. But he will not have to raise rates as high as he normally would and put so many people out of work if Congress would just stop spending money like it was ditch water. And it is so clear. It's economics 101. And why President Biden does not understand that, it's unfathomable to me.
You think, Senator Kennedy, Biden will kind of sober up and say, okay, we're going to have some spending restraint. He's created roughly $5 trillion in spending and borrowing in just 2 years. Now, I know some Republicans went along with some of those bills, and I'm sorry about that. But anyway.
I didn't.
I know you didn't. You've been great, sir. But I'm just saying, I mean, you think Biden will change, reset, take cognizance finally of the importance of the Republicans taking the House and so forth. There's some Democrats in the Senate that might want to sober up on spending, too. I mean, do you think Biden will? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. I've known Biden a long time, but the President Biden is not the guy that I used to know, Senator Kennedy. You know Biden. What do you think? Will he sober up?
Well, I certainly hope he does. But I thought he would sober up on the border.
Yeah.
Look, you can't fix somebody who doesn't want to be fixed. And I've just about reached the conclusion that nobody's coming to save us but ourselves. And if the president doesn't want to get out his old Econ 101 textbook and read it, Congress certainly can do its role. And we ought to have both Democrats and Republicans join together today talking about how we can reduce the growth of federal spending and debt accumulation to help Jay Powell so he doesn't have to raise rates so high that millions and millions of Americans lose their jobs. And that's about the bottom line.
No, well said. Last one, Senator. We just got a minute left. Were you surprised that the FBI went to Rehoboth Beach today? This is the first day of the special counsel. We don't exactly know what they found. There's some talk about not documents per se, but notes or note cards or something. What do you make of this Rehoboth investigation? First day of the new special counsel,
I blame all of this on the Department of Justice. President Trump had classified documents. Justice sent him a subpoena. When he didn't comply with the subpoena, instead of going to court and enforcing the subpoena, the Attorney General sent in the FBI and raided his home. The Attorney General just forgot one thing. He forgot to see if his own boss had done the same thing. And here we are. It's off to the races. I think most Americans respect the office of the presidency. I don't think anybody wants to see anybody prosecuted unless it can be proven they were using documents to try to hurt America. But this started when the Attorney General decided to escalate and raid a former president's home. I mean, beauty fades, dumb is forever. And once he did that, it was Katie bar the door, and that's why we're in the mess we're in right now.
Yes, sir. Senator John Kennedy, thank you, sir. We appreciate it very, very much.